The Islamic civilization was a civilization, it was a qualitative civilization and a quantitative civilization. It was a civilization of ideas in the mind, but it was also a civilization that produced many things in the real world and impacted the real world. And it had two foundational sciences. One of them was grammar. It was a civilization that was obsessed with grammar. And arguably, the Muslims probably did more to promote grammar than any other civilization in human history. And we have much debt to the Islamic civilization in terms of language. Even the Jewish tradition, which based their lexicons on the Muslim lexicons, because the Muslims were really the first people to produce serious dictionaries. And we owe a great debt to the Persians for their incredible analysis of the Arabic language, the deconstructing, and then the putting together again of the Arabic language. But grammar was everything to the Muslims because they took language incredibly seriously, and they also wanted to understand revelation. They wanted to know what are all the possibilities of these sentences in the Quran. There's so many possibilities. I'll just give you one example. The Quran says not to debate with the people of the book, except in the most beautiful way. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا مِنْهُمْ. It says إِلَّا. إِلَّا in Arabic is usually used as an exception, except for. But some of our scholars argued in this case, إِلَّا here is actually a conjunction meaning and also. But it was done with the إِلَّا to point out that it's actually difficult to do that. So there's just an example. And then there are many examples from Arabic poetry where إِلَّا is used as a wow al-ataf. It's used as the conjunction and also. That's just one example, but when you get into tafsir, what you see is that our scholars were just trying their best to see and exhaust all the possibilities in every verse in the Quran and in every hadith or statement of the Prophet ﷺ. And the way to do that in their understanding was first and foremost through grammar. And that's why they were obsessed. But the second great obsession of the Muslims was geometry. And this is why everywhere you go in the Muslim world, you will see geometric patterns everywhere. You'll see them in their tessellations. You'll see them in their mosaics. You'll see them in all of the mosques, the great mosques that the Muslims built. Even the great mosques of Turkey, which were designed after the Christian churches. You will see all of this geometry. Euclid was studied obsessively by our scholars. Euclid is reintroduced into European civilization through the great Arabic commentaries on Euclid. The Muslims were literally obsessed with the book of the 13 books of Euclid. Qadi Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi said that in his Rihla, he said, by the age of 15, I had mastered the 13 books of Euclid, and I was capable of working out star positions with an astrolabe at 15. So you can imagine what kind of civilization that was when the 15-year-olds had done. In our high schools, we study 3 of the 13 books in what's called high school geometry. But one of the things about Euclid and why he's so important, and Euclid is arguably one of the most influential human beings that ever lived. His book had a massive impact on Western and Muslim civilization. But one of the reasons why Euclid's so important is because Euclid is a metaphysician. Euclid, you cannot do those theorems without going to the assumptions. Euclid gives you at the very outset of his book, and then the chapters that need further elucidation, he gives you the axioms, the assumptions, the common notions, and he lets you know that these are things that cannot be proved. These are the first principles. And so what metaphysics is it's going to the first principles. And this is why Muslims always began their sciences with the 10 mabadi, the starting places of their sciences, to let you know a definition. We have now, right next door, a graduating class from Berkeley that are getting BAs. A lot of them are getting BAs, Bachelor of Arts. If you ask them what that BA, what are the arts that you are now a bachelor in? Most of them really, I don't think, could answer that question. Because the BA, we inherited the BA from an ancient tradition. which is the tradition of the liberal arts, these sciences that are supposed to free us from the fetters of our faulty thinking. But now it really doesn't have any meaning. And a lot of our students now are given incredible assumptions from their teachers, but they're never taught what are the metaphysical foundations of the civilization. They're never taught about those first principles of the civilization. And just to give you a few very quickly, one of them is that anything that can't be proved empirically or is not true by definition, what they call an analytic proposition, anything other than those two, either empirically provable or something that's true by definition, what they call the verification principle, is gibberish. From gibberish is actually from Jabir, because Jabir ibn Hayyan, his books on chemistry were translated into Latin. They were so difficult to understand, the Latins called them, the medievals called them gibberish. So that's, but literally, metaphysics, theology is now seen as meaningless. If you say there is no God but God, many people in the humanities and philosophy departments today will say that's a meaningless statement. That's an assumption of the civilization. Another foundational assumption that people don't really think about is that science. Do we call, for instance, is Isaac Newton a scientist? Because in many ways, this civilization would not recognize Isaac Newton as a scientist.